Hey everybody, how's it going? Like Butter here, and today I got a Division video to give you guys an update of what went down last night on State of the Game regarding the 1.3 Underground update. Now, they discussed a lot of changes that we haven't heard about prior to last night, or technically this morning, and I want to go over and give my opinions on it and what I think about some of these changes, because some of these changes I think are really unnecessary and are going to be pushing the game actually in the wrong direction rather than the right one, and we'll talk about that. And you guys can give me your opinions down in the comment section below. As always, you guys are pretty verbal about your opinions, so that's always nice to read through, as long as you guys are being respectful and we have a, civil, humanized, talk about all this. So anyways, I'm going to first go over the things that I did like, and then we'll go, as the video goes on, we'll talk about the things that I didn't like. So the first thing that comes to mind about positive things of this new update is that we are finally going to be able to recalibrate our weapons. So what that means is, if you guys know, on your gear, if you go to the recalibration station, if there's like one stat on your gear that basically makes your gear not viable, but having that stat would make it a potential god roll. So say you have all the stats that you want except one really terrible one, you can re-roll that stat to get something else. And you're going to finally be able to do that with weapon talents on your guns. So say you have, brutal, deadly, swift, like my MP7 for example, I'm going to be able to re-roll swift for something a little bit better, like responsive or maybe even fierce. We'll have to see. So yeah, that's awesome. I'm really happy that they did this. I think this should have been in from the start. I think recalibrating one weapon talent isn't a big deal, and I'm all for anything that's making players stronger right now. Some people are gonna be like, "Oh, that's OP." No, it's not. Trust me. With all these other nerfs, you're gonna see that being able to re-roll a talent is not going to be OP whatsoever. So another thing that I really liked is they talked about the special ammo nerfs, which this kind of makes the Reclaimer set make a little more sense. A lot of people thought that the Reclaimer set was going to be extremely overpowered with how strong incendiary bullets and explosive rounds are right now. But now what they've done is they basically have nerfed the damage of explosives by 75% and also the duration that you're on fire by 75% as well. So before, you get caught on fire and you kind of had to pat yourself down for a good like 5 to 6 seconds. Now that's going to be down to almost only like 1.5 seconds. So you're only going to be on fire for like a split second. So it's not going to be a huge deal like it was. You probably have to roll once and then boom, you're probably not on fire anymore. So that's why the Reclaimer set probably won't be, super overpowered. I think it will still be really strong. I think it'll be good to have at least one person running Reclaimer in your group, even though it's going to be kind of a boring set to run. If somebody, doesn't mind playing a support role, I think that will be a really good set for people to use in order to have more team fighting, especially like, being able to pop an energy bar and have that go across your entire team. Or maybe, you want the cooldown reduction, so you pop a soda or whatever. So I think that's actually pretty cool. I think that's going to add more variety to the game. I think it's going to be nice. And finally, we're not going to be able to get one-shotted by the explosive bullets. The explosive bullets are a 1-to-1 ratio now. It's not how it used to be where, you may crit somebody for 40,000 damage and then the explosion would do like 200,000 damage. It's not going to be like that anymore. It's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio, which means it's going to be how I thought it was originally intended. So if you shoot the ground, for example, like say, there's a player behind cover and you're using explosive rounds and you're shooting the ground next to them, it's going to do the amount of damage that it would if you were to direct impact them. Then if you direct impact them, you're going to hit them for a certain amount of damage, and then the explosion is going to do that same amount of damage. So explosive rounds will still be viable, but they're way less effective than they used to be. So that's good. I really dislike that explosive rounds and incendiary bullets are even in the game. But at least, they're not going to be super overpowered anymore. So that I really liked. They're also nerfing the M1A, which I'm not too understanding of. I kind of understand why they're doing it, because a lot of people are doing, like, this one guy the other day was like bouncing off smart cover and just hip firing the M1A. So I think they want the M1A to be less of a weapon that people can use up close. So I understand that nerf. It makes sense. But these two nerfs I don't understand. So they're nerfing the AUG and the Vector by 10%. That's base damage. So, and their idea behind this was that too many people were using the AUG and the Vector. And that the reason people are using the AUG and the Vector is because the other SMGs are so incredibly hard to find. Now, maybe now that you can recalibrate talents, you'll see people using more weapons. So if you get an MP5 with like brutal, responsive, and like something really terrible like ferocious or something, you can re-roll ferocious, and that way, you know, you'll have an MP5 that's actually viable. But MP5s, MP7s, you know, all those other SMGs are just so rare to find one with decent talents that of course people are going to use Vectors and AUGs, because those are the blueprints that are out that people can craft. It has nothing to do with those being the strongest weapons. I think the Vector is garbage, personally. I think the horizontal stability is terrible. The rate of fire isn't that high, and overall I just don't think it's a very good gun. It's got a short clip. It does do high damage, but now the Vector is going to be useless in my opinion. Absolutely useless. Some of you may think otherwise, but me personally, with that horizontal stability and the inaccuracy from the Vector, you're going to see some really crazy changes with a 10% damage reduction. Same thing with the AUG. I think the AUG still may be viable, but you know, that 10% reduction of damage is going to make a huge difference. So thank God my MP7 didn't get touched. But what about you guys out there that haven't found a good MP7 or a good MP5 that's viable to use yet? Like, you guys are just getting your guns nerfed just because you guys had the guns that were usable because of the blueprints and stuff. So it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, it's pretty obvious why a lot of people are using those SMGs. It's because they're the ones that are available. But MP7s and MP5s, like I said, are just almost impossible to find with decent talents right now. So of course people are going to be using AUGs and Vectors. I don't think they needed a nerf. I think that's really... I think SMGs overall don't need a nerf. I don't know why they're nerfing them. I understand why they are, because of everything else being bad. But instead of nerfing SMGs, why not make assault rifles, LMGs, and shotguns actually viable? Make them, buff the other weapons. Don't nerf things. When you nerf things, it just pisses people off. Like, so many people that kind of grinded for their gear, like, are just depressed right now because of all these nerfs and changes that are being made to these things that people have spent hours and hours and hours grinding for. So if you don't know, basically only the new SMGs are getting crit hit damage. Your old SMGs are going to keep crit chance, which I don't like at all, because if you're going to change it to crit damage, I think everything should change to crit damage. It's going to be kind of like awkward for new players who don't fully understand that, wait, why does my SMG have crit damage, but you know, that streamer that I just watched has crit chance? Like, it's just going to cause confusion. I think they should have all been converted to crit damage, but apparently they couldn't do that because of technical reasons. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird, some of these changes that they're making. So yeah, the next one that I want to talk about is it's pretty insane, actually. But we'll leave that for last. I do want to talk about the changes they're making to LMGs. So they're having a 30%, or it's actually 25%. It was 30, and then they changed it. So 25% damage increase to players out of cover. But I think, like, people don't realize that this isn't actually 25% extra damage. You're not going to be doing 25% extra damage. You're going to be doing 5% extra damage, something like that. So a lower percent, because you got to remember, with 75% mitigation, I think it's I think I did the math. It's like 6.25% extra damage. With 75% mitigation, which most of the players have in the Dark Zone at this point, you're basically barely getting a damage buff at all. I don't think LMGs are going to be, you know, useful. I think they're still going to be pretty bad. Shotguns are getting a small damage buff, but they talked about having, you know, things incorporated to the PvP meta, and I think you can find, you know, with the assault rifles, they couldn't find a balance of armor penetration that worked in PvP, and they also couldn't find some sort of variety or version of stagger that would fit shotguns. And I just think that if shotguns had a percent chance, much like crit, where there was a percentage chance of slowing an enemy, it would make shotguns so much more viable, because especially on PC, it's so ridiculous because you have players just kind of like running around in circles, and I think there needs to be more ways of crowd controlling somebody. And I think a small slow wouldn't be a huge deal, but it would be viable for shotgunners because you can kind of immobilize somebody and slow them down. Now, I'm all a fan for soft CC, which means like slows and things that kind of impair your movement and stuff, but things like the shock turret that have like hard CC, people are going to flock to because it's like really in this meta with all the tankticians. It's the only way that people are going to die, especially with, you know, with things getting nerfed and tankticians and not. I don't know, like these nerfs are just ridiculous. I just don't agree with them, and I just think that this is just unnecessary. If you're confused what I'm talking about, I'm reading my notepad here and I'm looking at the next thing that's just kind of triggering me. So this is the worst thing that I think of the entire discussion that they had. They are going to be changing Sentry and Striker to be spread over a 5-piece set. So basically what that means is instead of being able to build 3 strikers to get 50% crit hit damage, you're going to have to instead build 4 strikers to get that same value. So the crit hit damage is probably going to be spread out. So maybe like, you know, 3-set striker is only like 35% crit hit damage or 40% crit hit damage, and then the 4-piece is going to be like 50. I don't know if they're going to do that. I think the 4-piece, if you have to build 4-piece to get crit hit damage, I really think that it should be buffed if they want to kind of spread out the amount of damage that's being done, or the amount of options in a build. I think they should have it so that like 3-piece striker is like maybe 35% crit hit damage, and then 4-piece striker should be like 65. It should be spread out, and it should reward the people who want to build more of those sets. So I don't know what they're going to do there. They're basically nerfing the only 2 viable options right now in the Dark Zone if you're a PvP player like myself. You know, Sentry and Striker are really the only, you know, halfway decent builds that can help you do damage. Now, they're basically saying that, you know, we're nerfing this so that people will use other builds. And that's not the way to go about it, in my opinion. I don't think they should be nerfing the 2 only viable options if you want to do damage. And I think they should be instead buffing everything else. Like, the new gear sets are terrible, dude. Like from 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3, the gear sets for PvP are not viable at all. Like, obviously the Reclaimer set will be nice for having a support, but if you look at like the bonus talents compared to what Striker and Sentry were, it's so bad. So instead of nerfing these gear sets that people have already spent hours and hours farming for, buff the other gear sets. Buff the gear sets that people aren't using right now because of how bad they are. And I really disagree with them just nerfing everything. Nerf, 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 and boom, guess what? No nerf to sticky bombs, no nerf to tankticians, no nerf to armor, like no counter to armor, nothing. So basically they're nerfing, nerf, 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 and tankticians and tank meta is getting stronger, stronger, and stronger. So we have to kind of wait and see how it plays out. But, you know, a lot of my viewers, including myself, watching State of the Game, we were not very happy with the things that they were talking about. Now, obviously, special ammo needed a nerf. But what about, like, shock turrets? What about, like, sticky bombs? What about BFB? Like all these boring things that are just being abused in the game because there's nothing else to kill people. Like there's nothing more boring in a game than if you're sitting there shooting each other and no one's dying. I'd rather get 2-shot like COD than sit there and be in a fight with someone fucking shooting them for 35 minutes. Like, it's just, I don't know, something needs to be done about the tank meta, and I think these changes are, right now, from the outside looking in. Obviously, I haven't tested it, so I don't know yet. But in my opinion, I think this is going to make the game even harder to PvP, and a lot of people are not very happy right now. So we're going to wait before we freak out and just say, screw this game. I'm not going to do that. I plan on covering the game even if the PvP gets stale, you know, about updates and maybe PvE and stuff like that. But I'm a little frustrated, I'm a little upset, I'm a little sad that I feel like the developers are like acknowledging the problems, but they're not doing anything about it. Like they had a new guy on State of the Game last night who's like the weapons guy who works with like all the weapons and stuff, and like I really like that he was referring to things as like the PvP meta and how they're working on this and we're working on that, but we're not really seeing any real action. There's not going to be any real changes until we start seeing stat differences. Like LMGs, my opinion, not going to be viable. Assault rifles, not going to be viable. They were talking about like the guy was like, oh, but I think a lot of people like underestimate optimal range. Optimal range is useless in this game. This game is so fast paced and so up close based that in order to kill anyone, you have to be super close, unless you're using an M1A or an M44 or something like that, where you can snipe people from a distance. Assault rifles, no matter what the optimal range is, isn't going to matter. It's not, because I think they underestimate the fact that assault rifles have really low stability. Okay, they're hard to control most of the time. They're inaccurate. Even if you have a lot of accuracy, like you're not going to be shooting extremely straight. So when they get to that point where the optimal range is going to be helpful, it's almost impossible to land all your shots, because if you're like burst firing, your guns don't do enough damage in order to put someone down. They're either going to heal, they're going to, you know, pop defensive vault, they're going to use a med kit. There's so many different things that you can do to keep yourself alive in this game, that optimal range doesn't matter. Assault rifles need armor penetration. They need armor ignorance. LMGs need armor shred. They need to have this way where, you know, when you're getting shot with a certain amount, if you get like 10 stacks, you get hit by an LMG 10 times or something without missing or something, it shreds 10% of their armor. I don't know. There needs to be armor penetration in this game, or have it so that LMGs, you know, if you hit them for a certain amount of time, it reduces their healing by a certain percentage. Don't give them PvE talents and be like, oh, well, they're buff now. No, they're not. Like assault rifles are still going to be terrible. SMGs are still going to be, you know, even with the nerfs, they're going to be one of the best, because they have high fire rate, high damage, and decent accuracy when you're hip firing. And that's why people use SMGs, because this game is all about DPS. It's all about the amount of damage you can do in a short amount of time, because of all the ways that people have to heal, and you know, you kind of have to shred somebody in between medkits. Like one person pops a medkit, you know, you start shooting him, you have like a 6-second window or a 5-second window before he pops his next medkit and completely goes back to full life. So it's very important that they start making some changes, and they can't talk about, like, they can't be like, oh, we're working on it. They need to start making these changes now. Such a large percentage of the players have already left the game, and like, I don't think making these nerfs are going to bring people back. If anything, it's just going to make the people that were already here go away from the game. So I'm very disappointed right now. I do understand why they're making some of these changes, but these changes should have been made from the beginning, not now. It's at a point now where they should just leave strikers the way it is, leave sentries, leave everything the way it is, and buff the other weapons up. And then what you can do is, if you want to, you know, for future reference, make the gear sets that are higher levels. This is all they need to do, right? When you have a game that doesn't have a cap, like this game doesn't technically have a cap, they can keep raising and putting out higher, you know, gear sets and weapons and higher gear score items in the game. What you need to do is make it so that when you go up in the ranks, when you go up in the gear score levels, make it so that you fix those things later on. So for example, if you want SMGs to have crit hit damage, leave the SMGs for these levels to have crit chance, and then as you know the levels get higher, so once you get up near the 200 and 300 gear score weapons, then put crit damage, then fix the talents, then make different changes. Like, they can easily just make changes without having to change the things that are already in the game by changing future gear sets and future items, just by making, because people are going to upgrade. They're not going to be like, oh, this is stronger, sorry, I'm going to stay on this 204 weapon if there's 300 gear score SMGs that have like 60% crit hit damage in the game. They're not going to do that. So I just think that some of the devs over at Massive are really making some massive mistakes, and it's definitely hurting the community and hurting the game. And this was a huge problem with Destiny. Like, Bungie nerfed so many guns into the ground, and it just kind of turned so many people off of the game. And I don't think it's ever good, especially in a game that has no armor penetration and no counter to the amount of armor that you can stack, to be nerfing things instead of buffing. Like, just I feel like I've said this a million times in this video. Instead of nerfing things, buff assault rifles, buff LMGs, buff shotguns, give people a reason to actually use them. The new talents, by the way, are terrible. There's like one talent where you do 12% extra damage when your skills aren't active. Why would I do 12% extra damage when 75% of that is getting mitigated, when I can have like a pulse where I do like 100% crit hit damage and like, I don't know, like 20% crit chance? Like, it makes no sense. The only way to really do damage in this game is through high amounts of crit hit damage, high amounts of crit hit chance, high fire rate, and that's pretty much it. You basically need to just melt your opponent before they can pop 7 med kits and use triage constantly. So I'm a bit frustrated. Hopefully you guys who are watching this video aren't frustrated. I know some of you guys will have the opposite opinion of being like, oh no, this is good for the game, and you haven't even tried it yet. But just know that I've been around the gaming industry for 10 years. I've been a gamer my whole life, and I know when changes are good and bad for a game, and I really think that these changes are bad. Until they put some sort of armor penetration in the game, these nerfs will never make sense to me. And I think it's just going to be even harder to kill people now. It's going to be even worse. Like, tank meta is going to be so unbelievable that it's literally going to be unplayable. So like I said, if PvP becomes unplayable, I probably won't play this game as much anymore. I am really excited about the PvE side of things that they're adding in, like the underground and stuff, but you can only kill so many of the same enemies over and over before it starts getting a little stale. So I'm really hoping that we're getting new dark zone areas and new stuff, because if this is like the 3rd update and we still haven't gotten any new dark zone areas, even though the dark zone's like the most popular area and thing to do in the game, I'll be pretty upset. But there's going to be a report, I think on Monday, they said before the patch, that they're going to be, talking about things in more depth. So I'm going to wait until then before I like completely rage quit the game. But definitely not a fan of some of these changes, and I hope some of you guys agree with me. Hopefully in the future we see some sort of changes that start to push the game in the correct direction again. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Sorry for this like 20-minute rant. I've been Like Butter, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care, everybody.